everyone, this is Mrs. Moriarty, and I'm here to discuss with us topic 4.6, which is all about watersheds. Now, what is a watershed? That's going to be all of the land that winds up draining into a specific body of water, whether that be maybe a river, lake, bay, or even the ocean. Now, what type of factors can influence the flow of water within a watershed? That can be many different things. One can be the slope of the land. Any type of ridges or divides of the land can direct runoff in specific types of directions. Usually, the greater slope of the land, the faster the velocity of the runoff of that water within the watershed may be. The more velocity usually indicates a greater amount of erosion, so we're going to most likely see a lot more sediment within the rivers or streams that eventually collect at the end of maybe lakes, ponds, or even the ocean. We can also see the vegetation within the land of the watershed can certainly play a role in how much infiltration there may be. Right, just from our soil topics, we know that if soil is going to be very sandy versus being very clay, right, we know that that can influence how much permeability or porosity there may be and how much infiltration there might be. Right, so the more vegetation along the riparian zones of the watershed, the greater infiltration of, let's say, rainwater may be and groundwater recharge. So that, remember, that's going to be the water that collects underground in, let's say, an aquifer between rock. So soil permeability along the watershed is going to determine how much runoff there may be and how much infiltration there may be. If we have a lot of really, let's say, sandy soils, we're probably going to see maybe a little less erosion. With clay, we know that there's going to be a lot more flooding. A lot of that water doesn't necessarily infiltrate into the soil, so we're going to probably see it carried more frequently. And other human activities can also play a role in the quality of water along the watershed. Because remember, if a watershed encompasses all of the land where all of the water drains into, there's a lot of activity that goes on that land, such as the clear cutting or removal of vegetation. That could simply be for using the wood for paper products. That could be clearing the land for agricultural purposes, clearing the land for maybe urbanization, right? Putting impermeable surfaces there, which is going to create more flooding. Removing any kind of vegetation always creates a greater amount of erosion rates because now we don't have a stable root structure. We can also see the construction of dams or even reservoirs on the watershed. When we dam a river or prevent the flow of water within that watershed, what can happen is any of the erosion that takes place can gather in that one area, and now where that water pools, its quality is much lower than what it may have started with maybe upstream. Also, if we see any mining take place along a watershed, any kind of mining activity also deposits a lot of minerals into that water, or even things such as arsenic and mercury can wind up in waterways due to mining along watersheds too. So there are many different activities involving humans that can impact the quality of water along the watershed as well. So we need to be mindful of what we do along our watersheds to prevent the destruction of the quality of water. So what can be some solutions to any watershed contamination we might see? So we want to first probably combat issues such as erosion, right? That can create a lot of sediment pollution along a watershed, so we need to repair the riparian zones. Remember, the riparian zones are going to be the zones of emergent plants, usually around rivers, streams, lakes, and ponds. So we need to ensure that we plant maybe more native vegetation like trees and grasses to stabilize the banks, filter any pollutants, or provide habitats for wildlife that can help to maintain the quality of the water. We can also implement the use of cover crops in the off-season, especially if we have maybe agricultural fields near the watershed. Those cover crops can help to prevent any soil erosion in the off-season. We can manage stormwater runoff in more developmental areas better by treating the water at a wastewater treatment plant. Cities and towns can install permeable type pavements, or what's known as rain gardens and green roofs, in order to capture any kind of excess water and hopefully filter it better before it winds up entering any streams or rivers within that watershed. So at this point, folks, this brings us to our practice FRQ for 4.6. Identify one human activity that could negatively affect water quality along a watershed and propose a solution to the human activity mentioned above. So at this point, make sure to write down your practice FRQ in your journal and on the Edpuzzle. So here are some human activities that you could have indicated that would negatively affect water quality. That would be clear cutting, right? Deforestation, the cutting down of trees or removal of vegetation. The installment of impermeable type surfaces, usually used in urban or suburban type cities. The construction of a dam, mining for minerals along the watershed, or even the use of synthetic fertilizers on nearby agricultural fields. To combat any one of these activities, so you need to make sure that whatever the activity you mentioned above matches the solution that you have below. So if you mention something such as the removal of vegetation, then maybe a better solution might be to plant cover crops, or maybe plant native vegetation in replacement of those ones that have been removed. If you mentioned the installment of impermeable surfaces or urbanization in some manner, maybe the installation of permeable pavement to increase infiltration and prevent flooding might help, or stormwater runoff being captured at a wastewater treatment plant before it returns back to a river, stream, or lake. Alright everyone, that is it for our video on 4.6. If you have any questions, please leave it at the end.